Okay. Welcome to the March NRHS Wisconsin chapter meeting. It is Friday, March 3rd, and we are here gathered to see a wonderful presentation that we're looking forward to. And so just a couple of notes here in case you don't know who I am. I'm Keith Schmidt, and I am the current vice president of the chapter. Unfortunately, last month, when we had our monthly meeting, no one was elected or opted to run for president. So we currently, the position is vacant. So as the ranking officer, I am trying to do what I can. So I'm going to put out a plea right now. The chapter needs a president, and it really does need a president. And don't let all this stuff up here intimidate you. If you want to be president and host, we will help you set up and do what you need to do. So please consider it, and it would be something that the chapter really needs as a president. But you have to be a member of the chapter and national in order to be an officer. So you would need to be a member of both to be on the board or an officer in the chapter. So please consider that. That would be, and we're also looking to do a setup committee that would help with setup and help do things like that, where we could do those for you and have it all done so that when you get here, all I have to do is host a meeting. So please consider it and give it some thought and let me know. You can get a hold of me at president@nrhswis.org and let me know, because anytime we can hold a special meeting and we can have an election and get you into that position. So that's my plea for that, and my plea for setup committee. If you're interested in that, same way, president@nrhswis.org. Another note I'd like to make is a date change for next month. Next month's meeting will be on the second Friday of April. The first Friday in April is Good Friday, and obviously the church would be in use for worship on Good Friday evening. So we will be here on April 14th, not April 7th. So if you come on April 7th, you may end up in a Good Friday service. So, but that's your choice. So again, please keep and you'll see that in Sparks and Cinders that the date change. It was in there this month and it'll be in there next month. So another thing is that all these presentations and everything that goes on here are done by the chapter, and we would like you to become a member. If you're not already a member of the chapter, it's very easy to do. You can go to the chapter website, again, www.nrhswis.org, and you can just click on the join button and it'll show you how to do that. You can write a check or you can click on it and you can use PayPal. PayPal would be an additional $1 because there are some fees associated with PayPal that get charged to the chapter. So right now there are, well, I got to count really high here. Let's see. We have 10 people in the room down here, and it looks like we have about 35 in the Zoom room. So looks like it's going to be a nice crowd. So thank you all for coming out. We did not get the snow that was predicted here in Milwaukee. So we have a few people here in the room. And are there any questions from anybody in the room here? I don't see any. So Mike is our membership committee person, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mike for any membership updates. And then Mike is also going to introduce our speaker for the evening. So Mike, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. Greetings from Western Wisconsin. Hello, everybody. And Keith mentioned that all of our programs are a benefit of membership in the Wisconsin chapter. We have been sending out reminders about our programs to our members and to the friends of the chapter, folks who are not necessarily affiliated. Due to a change being made by our email provider, those emails to non-members are really going to be cut back dramatically. So if you want to make sure that you know when the next event is that we're doing, you might want to just become a member. And as Keith said, it's $21. That extra dollar doesn't even cover our entire PayPal fee, but it's close. So we value your membership. We do have a few people who have not renewed yet for 2023. I've sent them all notes reminding them that their memberships have lapsed, and I will not mention any names, but there is a gentleman in Minnesota who replied by renewing this evening. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. And then I'm told that our good friend Kevin Keefe is planning to renew as well. I just got a text from him. Wonderful. So our programs are generally recorded. That's one of the virtues of doing this Zoom thing. And they're made available on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/@NRHSWIS. And you'll find a link for our YouTube page on our website, www.nrhswis.org. We just recently, I guess it was 4 days ago, we put up, finally, I had the chance to edit and upload the presentation by Paul Swanson a month ago of Harry Evans's photos, the late Harry Evans. Some wonderful, wonderful stuff. If you haven't seen it yet, by all means, please give it a shot. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had 3 online slideshows by Jerry Pfeiffer, Jerry Krug, and Jim Yankee. They were all posted yesterday as well, so please do check those out on our YouTube page. Once again, www.nrhswis.org for anybody who is not yet a member or who would like to renew right away. So I am going to turn over the floor to our presenter right now. The presenter is Richard Koenig. He's coming to us from the Kalamazoo area right now. And so through the miracle of modern technology, I don't have much to say about him because I have a feeling he's going to be talking a little bit about himself. So with that, please welcome to the Wisconsin chapter NRHS, Richard Koenig. Richard.
Hi, everybody. Do I have my mic on?
Yep, you are sounding good. Everything is great on our end.
All right, thanks. I'd like to thank Mike Uhas and the Wisconsin chapter of the National Railway Historical Society for having me here today. And of course, I'd like to thank you all for attending. I'm going to go ahead and I'm an image kind of guy, so I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Yeah, I have to say, I'm perusing your website, and somebody tipped me off to your organization. I've been perusing the website. It looks like you guys run a really nice, tight ship up there, a really good chapter. So I'm sorry I didn't get to see it before, but I've watched some of the talks on tape, and it's really fantastic. So kudos to you all for that. But I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Let's see. This is where I grew up. I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. A rail enthusiast. I'm going to read here for just a few slides, and then I'll put the script down and sort of go ad lib, if you will. A rail enthusiast and photographer in my teens, I lost touch with trains for several decades while I went to college and eventually found my career. Oops. Let's see if I can make it go here. Guess I don't use that. Okay. After leaving my home in the Midwest, I studied photography at Pratt Institute and went to work in New York as a studio manager for a still life advertising photographer. After a decade working in New York, I returned to Bloomington to study photography in graduate school at Indiana University. Upon completion, I transitioned into academia as a professor of art at Kalamazoo College in Michigan. I did conceptual work, such as this piece, but began to miss straight documentary work. Sometime in the aughts, I had the joy of rediscovering railroads along with my early slides and negatives, which will make up tonight's talk. In 2010 or so, in preparation for a sabbatical, I had the notion of documenting railroads in some way as part of my research. I stumbled across the story of the first transcontinental railroad and was hooked by it. I would focus on that subject for 8 or 9 years in the run-up to the sesquicentennial of the Golden Spike. Bits and pieces of my contemporary views along the first transcontinental railroad have been published over the last few years, including in the NRHS Bulletin. But back to the old stuff. What follows then is a memoir of sorts, mined from the distant memories and transparencies of a teenage kid who is interested in photography and railroads. The period discussed, 1975 through 1980 or so, was an interesting time in the rail industry. Class 1 railroads still existed in a wide variety, and a good number of first-generation diesels still roamed the rails. Looking back now, many of the routes where I photographed trains in revenue service have since been abandoned and nearly wiped from the face of the earth. I begin with 2 railroads that intersected my hometown of Bloomington, Indiana. The relatively modern Illinois Central line to Indianapolis, finished in 1906. And the older Louisville and Nashville, former Monon, built during the middle of the 19th century. I then will broaden the scope somewhat to illustrate a few other railroads of the Midwest during this pivotal time period just prior to the Staggers Act. So now I can put down my script and just go off the slides here. So part 1, I'm gonna, I have 30 images of, I think 30 images of the Illinois Central around a little bit on either side of Bloomington. It was known as the high dry for all its, since it was built at a relatively, modern era, railroad-wise. It was built quite well, high fills, high bridges, had one tunnel near Bloomington, which you'll see. So that was the nickname that people on the IC gave it anyway. And here's a map of it. You can see Bloomington sort of in the center down there. That dotted line is a little branch line. The IC head down to some limestone quarries. The Monon is listed as C&IL here for Chicago, Indianapolis, and Louisville. And you can see the tunnel there a little northwest of Bloomington. So I'm going to cover the line from about Morgantown, you see up there around 2 o'clock or so, down to the famous viaduct at Salisbury. Yeah, you can see here just a few facts about it. I can't seem to retain these facts when I give these talks, so I like to just put the slide up. It was built in 1906, sold to the IC in 1911. The IC merged with the GM&O, of course, in 72. And then my images all come from that era. I grew up right next to the tracks, actually, and well, our second house was near the tracks on the east side of Bloomington, over by University Middle School, where we lived, and that's what really got me into railroads. When I moved there, when I think I was 11, almost 12 years old, and I guess the sound of those trains going by at night really sort of got into my bones. So my images are all going to come from that ICG era between 72 and 80 or so, more likely 75 to 80. I left in 81. In 86, the Indianapolis line was of the ICG would become the heart of the Indiana Railroad. And then that road has really flourished since then. And again, so I have 30 images here between Morgantown and the Salisbury Viaduct. So here's a train. So I was in high school, I was in the yearbook club or whatever it was. And I took photography classes with a man by the name of Roger Finkston. And we shot black and white film at that time. I began to shoot color slides. I shot Kodachromes. After just a very short period, I sort of found a railroad club over at Indiana University. So I started to go to slideshows and sort of pick up you know, how things are done, you know, in the rail enthusiast group, you know, and started to shoot slides. But I did shoot black and white often at the same time. So over this period of time, you'll see some black and white and some color. This is a southbound hopper train. We're going to see this train several times here in this sequence of images. Paducah rebuild, of course, on the front. It was all 4 axles here in Bloomington on both roads, really, except for, as you'll see, SDP 40Fs and E units on the Floridian coming up. It's a nice little motel in Helmsburg that is made up of old wooden cabooses. It would be nice to go, and if this still exists, I'm betting that it doesn't. They probably all fell apart, but it would be nice to track them down and see what roads those came from. This is the same train a little further down the line. This is all you know, northeast of Bloomington. Nice wigwag signal here, getting close to Lake Lemon, which is northeast of Bloomington. One of the first sort of tall structures we come to is known as the Shuffle Creek Viaduct. And this is sort of an offshoot of Lake Lemon there. And of course, the creek is called Shuffle Creek here. This bridge is, you know, this is still operational, part of the Indiana Railroad, and you can go online and see people's drone, really wonderful drone footage of trains of the Indiana Railroad going over this bridge. That's Lake Lemon off in the distance there. This is the one tunnel on the line. This is a northbound train. That train we were looking at is a southbound train. The railroad's known as north-south, even though for a lot of this in Indiana, it's running east-west. So this is a northbound train coming through the Unionville Tunnel. Of course, we really enjoyed it. The IC wasn't really good about painting their equipment. So when I moved to that house on the east side of town, looked out our picture window in the backyard, and I could see all these trains going by. Well, not all these trains, 2 trains a day each way, I think, a coal train and a freight. But there was often a mixture of paint schemes in these trains, red and white GM&O, black and white GM&O, black diamond IC, as we see here, and then mostly probably orange and white IC and ICG painted equipment. We're on the other side of the tunnel now. This is the approach. The tunnel is actually to our right, camera right. This train is a southbound train that's gone through the tunnel and is now headed toward Bloomington. Nice ice storm here. I didn't put dates on all these slides, but really we're probably in 76, 77 time period here. Same train we began with here. So there's an old timber bridge where State Road 45 crossed over, and it has since been pulled down, and there's a road crossing there. So This is on the other side of that bridge, same train. Because I've arranged my talk geographically rather than I don't know, chronologically. Some trains that we see are I'm going to see in an earlier time period here. This is the same train that would later go through the tunnel that we saw. This is just on the other side of that bridge. And this is the same train we saw. This is a southbound train that we saw in Shuffle Creek Viaduct coming. We had a pretty good winter. I forget if it was 76, 77 or 77, 78. And they ran this train out of Indianapolis. And I have an inkling they were running it just to clear out the cuts. But this one was really, really packed with snow. They had to dig the crew out at Bloomington. Getting close to Bloomington now. This is Smith Road on the east side of town. This is sort of getting close to our house too. I started taking pictures of trains before I could drive, and they built a bike path along the railroad here, just east of the 46 bypass and right next to our house. So I rode my bike down the bike path here, the brand new bike path, which is camera right, as you can see. I think you can see it at the edge of the frame there. And got an all GM&O consist here on a southbound empty hopper train. I may be riding my bike as I took this picture. And this is right adjacent to the house, the second house I grew up in. Nice, same thing here. We have a southbound hopper train going by with a nice passenger Jeep on the front, GP9. Going back to how the road is fairly modern, the road is almost completely grade separated through Bloomington, which is pretty cool. This is right in the area of the university. The power plant you see back there is university owned, and I think I'm on Fee Lane here now. Oh, Jordan Avenue, sorry, but it was a bridge that crossed over the line there. And this is the yard office in Bloomington. I've seen photographs. There used to be a passenger station right in front of the photographer here, towards the IC unit we see. That was I never saw that structure. And the building we see to the left was the yard office. And same train, same day. Photographed the weigh shed there, a little house for the scale. Same one there. I ran around with some people that I met at the railroad group on campus, and Ron Potch was one of them. He lives in Illinois, and he really got into night photography. You know, he had the books of O. Winston Link on his bookshelf, and we would use he was sort of the lighting guy, and I was the camera guy, and I would open the cameras and then hold a card in front of the lenses, a black card, and then he could walk around and pop off some flash bulbs. We were using flash bulbs in lieu of electronic flash. They were a little more powerful. They weren't good at freezing action, but they were pretty powerful. So he might walk around and pop the flash off 3 times or so in a situation like this. And I would cover the lenses in the intervening time so that ambient light from street lights and things of that nature would not shift the color of the film and really overexpose, with those green mercury vapor lamps, street lamps, things of that nature. And back then, of course, especially because I should say Ron Potch worked for the IC, and he was third trick operator at Bloomington. So we could climb on engines, and I could climb on top of the depot or the yard office for an angle or whatever. So I was pretty fortunate to have that sort of situation. This is not the train we just saw. This is an IC Black Diamond GP18 that was sitting in front of the yard office one night. There you can see the effects of the mercury vapor lamps that I was talking about. There's a street light in the distance there, creating all that green haze. This is one of the sort of little monuments or plaques that were placed at Illinois Central depots at the time. Well, actually before the time, this was in 1951, apparently, and at the centennial, the IC created these things and placed them all over the system, I gather. There's a nice one there in Bloomington. You can see the depot, though, is looking worse for wear. Here I am climbing on the yard office here. This is that same train I photographed coming south from Morgantown with empty hoppers. They came into the small yard there and backed in, filled up the yard with the empty hoppers to wait for a northbound train. You could see that the order board was out for this train that is coming. So I've shot this both ways. I guess it's hard to remember. This is over 40 years ago now, right? 45 years ago. It's pushing 50. But I probably had two cameras, black and white in one and color in the other, because we've seen both sort of intermittently here. This is the train that we started with in Morgantown. And I get to climb on that as well to photograph the northbound coming into town. There's a few more shots of Bloomington. There was a fair amount of pigs on the line back then. We shipped televisions out of an RCA plant in town. Yeah, there was interesting mix of traffic. I mean, at the time, I thought there was nothing, you know what I mean? But only one freight train a day and a coal train. But now it looks pretty exciting to see this. Again, I was probably drawn to the non-IC paint schemes here. A yard engine and a caboose. It wasn't a typical caboose there that I was used to seeing. Nice bit of trackside stuff to take in. This is just a little west of the railroad south of the yard office. Another one of those timber bridges on Rogers Street. I asked my parents nicely, and I was able to skip school when the Eagle came through. I remember it was February 2nd, 1976. This is the second, those of you who may know, this is the second bicentennial unit for the IC. The first one was wrecked almost immediately after it was painted. So they painted a second one, and that's this model here. So we're going railroad south or west of Bloomington. Look at that train, almost all pigs here. I should probably say I also ran around with Gary Dozel. He wrote a book on the Monon. He and his brother, I think Stephen, wrote some books together. And between Ron Podge teaching me about train photography and Gary Dozel, Gary really liked picturesque scenes, you know, with lots of scenery and things of that nature. So that sort of molded me as a rail shooter. This is that same day, of course, with the Eagle on the Salisbury Viaduct, which really is quite a bridge sort of in the middle of nowhere in southern Indiana. So that's it for just a quick showing of the Illinois Central through town. Now I want to spend a little more time on the LNN. But really, we usually just refer to it as the Monon, as Indiana's railroad, and that's what we called it. Here's an overview. It's a big X across the state of Indiana. It's got a couple of branch lines there to get to. One is to get to the coal in Southwest Indiana, and the other is to get to the fancy resort at French Lick. Oh, and then of course we have the branch to Indianapolis and the one to Michigan City. But I really ran around in this area between. I didn't even go north to Greencastle that often. I did. You'll see it. You'll see it in the slides. But really, I ran around between Ellettsville and Bedford for the most part. So right there in the center of that map. Well, the former Monon. So they built into Bloomington from the south in 1853, became the Louisville, New Albany, and Chicago in 1859. So here we are, civil. This is all prior to the Civil War. It's just amazing. Became the CIL in 1897, and then it was merged into the LNN in 1971. So once again, I like the IC is doing a merger in 72. Here we see the Monon being gobbled up in 71. My pictures are going to come from the after that time. So I would have been 11 in 71, and I did go to the depot to pick up one of my grandmothers who came from Storm Lake, Iowa. So she would have taken the IC to Chicago and the Monon down to Bloomington. Two roads, all that way. But I don't have any photographs of Monon equipment. The LNN quickly must have painted that stuff over. So all my images are going to come from this early LNN period once they took over. I left in 81, as I said. And in 82, the Seaboard Coastline absorbed the LNN. And in 86, the Seaboard system was merged into Chessie. Of course, the C&O, B&O, and Western Maryland. And I was gone for all of this. So I really missed this. I was still out east, but the line between Bloomington and Bedford was abandoned in 93. And a lot of the line to the north. The Monon still exists north of, north of Cloverdale, up there around Lafayette. It still exists, and Amtrak train runs on it north of Lafayette. But through town, it was on either side. Then from 95, the town was isolated. The Indiana Railroad did use a bit of the Monon to get to that RCA plant that I was talking about that was sort of cranking out TV still. But eventually that would slow and stop. And then they abandoned the yard in 2006. So we have 49 images here between, that's not true. I go north of Ellettsville. Sorry about that. I go from Greencastle down through Bloomington to Mitchell. Again, I'm going to work geographically. So you might see trains sort of jump around in direction, and once again, the time frame is the same, 75 to 80 or so. So this is up in Greencastle. We have two lines crossing the Monon in Greencastle. We have the Big Four as well as the Pensy that were paralleling each other there. We'll come back to that. I've got some slides of those coming up. But we're catching a southbound Floridian here. The Floridian before my time was running on the Penn Central, and apparently the track was just horrendous. And they eventually moved it to the Monon, which kind of makes sense, I guess. I mean, you miss Indianapolis, unfortunately, but you pick up two college towns, so that's a good thing. But also, what you're going to see with the Floridians are probably three periods of locomotives here. You're going to see the SDP 40Fs, and then there was a problem with those units, of course. And then we see some aging E units take over until this locomotive, the F40, could take over. And of course, here what we have, we're still running with legacy equipment. So we have an E unit tucked in. probably not so much for power, but maybe, but really for the steam generator. The Floridian was listed as always having a dome, and I think in most of my photographs it has at least one. Nice bowling alley with some muscle cars there off to the side here in Greencastle. Oh, and there's a semaphore too, which is nice. So here, the Big Four crosses over the Monon on a bridge, a flyover, and that's on the west side of, or sort of the northwest side of Greencastle. And on the southwest side of Greencastle, the Pensy crossed at a place called Limedale, and there was a tower there. So here we see, when I started photographing, the Floridian ran at night mostly, but it was running with usually 2 SDP-40Fs in elephant style, because they would split the train down in Florida and go to 2 different destinations. So it always ran elephant style with 2 SDP-40Fs. And here it is crossing over the Pensy at Limedale. Little town of Cloverdale, south of there. There were plenty of these little frame depots along the Monon, still in place when I was photographing, which is nice. A lot of them would be bought by people and preserved, although a couple of examples, I use that word preserved loosely. I can think of one place south of Bloomington where I think they have 2 of these depots, and they were just in horrible, horrible condition. Sort of a famous depot in Gosport, the run-through depot there made out of brick. Later, I would watch as they tore this building down. This is right on the river too, the White River that's all over Indiana. There's like 3 branches of it. It's ubiquitous, but the river's just off camera right here. Pensy had a line to Vincennes, from Indianapolis to Vincennes. It's sort of running behind the depot up on the hillside there. Little depot in a town just northwest of Bloomington called Ellettsville. You can see the same type of small frame depot there. We're between Ellettsville and Bloomington here. The Herald Telephone is the newspaper from Bloomington. And I didn't only photograph the Floridian, although you'll see plenty of pictures of it. I had photographed this train up the line at Quincy Junction, where the L&N had, the Monon had a branch down to the coal fields there. You might know that they had a branch over to the coal fields from Bedford to Bloomfield. It's called the B&B, but that was long gone by this time. There's a place just northwest of Bloomington at the top of the hill. It was really quite a hill to get out of town. As you'll see, we're going to see some pushers coming up, but this is a great little place. There's a siding there, and there's also a branch that went to the quarries from this spot called Hunter Switch. That's what the old maps called it anyway. It's Hunter Switch. This is after the problems arose with the SDP-40F, so we got to it was great for me as a kid, right? They switched the train to daylight hours, and it met. I got to see it going in both directions. It met down around between Bloomington and Bedford at about 4 o'clock every day. So I got to get out of school, get in my old secondhand car that my dad loaned me, and go take pictures. So that's how I was able to take all these pictures. Was probably when I was like a junior in high school. You can see a few tracks there. There's some plants out there. There's a Westinghouse plant that my father worked in. That's why I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana. Both of my parents are from Western Iowa, but he eventually got into working for Westinghouse, so that's why we ended up there. Oops. This is still at Hunter Switch. There was a 4-lane highway 37 was built over Hunter Switch, right where the siding comes to an end there. And this is out on a cold day, snowy day. We have a northbound L&N freight going up the hill, and then out of the blowing snow comes the southbound Floridian. Only one train at this point. So they later on, I looked this history up a while ago, and now I'm going to forget it. But they scaled back the train there near the end before it was discontinued completely. So that's why we don't have 2 locomotives on it at this point. Still have a couple of domes though, as you can see. Still at that overpass over Hunter Switch. That's where the switch is right there, as you can see in that photograph on the right. We have an L&N freight going up the hill. Well, both of these are obviously, but that's a Floridian running with a single E unit, which was sort of typical during this time. 218 miles from Chicago. As I said, there's a little line coming off at Hunter Switch that it went north into the quarry fields there. Indiana limestone, if you don't know, is like a fabulous building material. Empire State Building, the Pentagon. I could go on and on about famous buildings made out of limestone that came out of my backyard, so to speak. Almost literally, our first house was in earshot anyway of this quarry on the north side of town. But I think I only photographed one train working the quarries, so I kind of regret that. But the Monon was sort of known for working the quarries and hauling all that stone. This is the hill I was talking about, sort of climbing out of Bloomington. Nice S curve here, as you can see, coming up the hill. And as I said back then, I think soon enough after I left, there would be 6 axles on this line for freight, but it was all pretty much 4 axles when I was there. L&N got rid of the yellow noses at some point, probably to save money, right? And time painting engines. So they got rid of that nice yellow nose, and you can see just the gray nose on the later models here. This is, as my text says, this is where the IC flew over the Monon there on the west side of town. And, oops, this is where you can see the yard engine at McDole Yard was south of town. The yard engine would often be placed on the back of a train to push it up the hill. We're right in downtown Bloomington now. Again, well, I don't know. We have an SDP 40F and just a single one, so that change to the train makeup must have happened before the problems with the SDP 40Fs occurred. There was a derailment, and it smells suspiciously like it fit the pattern of what the SDP 40Fs were doing. Up around Ellisville. I did go up there and photograph that. Train rolling into the southbound train rolling into town here. The Monon used to have a nice limestone station right camera right here. It was a drive-in bank at this time, unfortunately. I don't know why anyone would tear down such a wonderful structure, but it was a drive-in bank in its stead. And of course, Amtrak just had like a little cinder block building there, very small, But as you can see, there's some traffic here with people getting on the train. This is just west, or I'm sorry, just south of there a little bit. You can see sort of downtown area. You can see the Motor Inn is sort of the Graham Hotel. That's what I started the talk with. I was photographing off of that structure, and our courthouse there as well. And McDowell Yard, as I mentioned, is south of town. Fairly big yard. I really loved going there when I first got into rail fanning. There was a turntable, a Y, lots of that sort of railroad accoutrement, you know, that was so enjoyable to explore and check out. A ladder track, you know, with several tracks. Pretty interesting place. You can see an Alco sitting down there. Maybe that was a yard engine. I'm not sure. Northbound train sitting on the siding. This is the south end of McDowell. We have a local sort of getting ready to go south here. The turntable, I'm sure there was a roundhouse there too, or a partial roundhouse, but it was gone by that time. There was some old equipment sort of off to camera right there, but unfortunately, I didn't photograph that stuff. I wish I would have photographed the turntable there. I don't know what I was thinking. This is the south end of the yard. You can see some couple of semaphores there with doll arms because the track is in the middle that's being governed. And this is just a few miles south of there, a little place called Clear Creek. And this is one of those depots that got saved, if you will. I'm doing air quotes right now because for all I know, it's rotted and fallen down at this point. Looks like we're 224 miles south of Chicago at this point. This image was published in Trains fairly recently, about a year ago or so, in an article about the GP7. Same place. We're looking south now at a northbound train coming up. I like the low light. They're sort of pumping light through those lenses of the semaphores. Just south of Clear Creek, then that's the name of the creek we see here. The Monon would go on to cross the Clear Creek, I don't know how many times, between here and Harrodsburg. 10 miles, 12 miles south. Little place not far down the line. There's a switch here that there's a little stub track that went off to limestone quarries. Phone booth there. Same spot. That's the track. It's a northbound train with an E unit there. I don't know if you've all run across those pictures that Behringer has through a museum in St. Louis, I think, right? And just wonderful pictures. He must have had a photographer by his side, and all the negatives are online. You can go up and down the Monon and see these wonderful 4x5 negatives. Up and down the line. There's one just like this here. So a few are really almost match mine, or I should say mine matches his actually in a few places. It's kind of fun to see. A few more miles down the road, this place was known as Ketchum's on some older maps and timetables for the Monon. Again, there's quarries around this area. That's what you can see, sort of the rocks in front of me, probably for the cut there, but that's limestone as well. So after the F40s came, those would run on trains. Sometimes they had E units, but later I think there were EB units. That were turned into heater cars for the most part, I think. I don't know if they were powered or not, but for a while they were running with an F40 up front and then an EB to heat the legacy equipment. In some of those famous paintings along the Monon and the photographs by Behringer, you can see this bridge. Highway 37 bridge south of Bloomington at a place. This is just north of a place called Harrodsburg. And you can see there 37, a sign for the 4-lane. I'm standing on the bridge for the new 4-lane road 37, and that's the old 37 you see in the distance there with the nice arched bridge. And you can see a sign for Bedford, which is coming up. But there's some really nice scenery between Harrodsburg and Bedford, and this is where I spent a lot of my time. You can see that after SCL got involved, we start seeing these units. I'm not sure if that was the case. They may have been leasing units. I've heard different things written about this on Facebook about why these alcoves were here, for instance. You can see a pair of semaphores there in the distance. Clear Creek once again. This is the Harrodsburg siding, and one time I was there, this may have been July 4th, 77. A couple of Floridians met there. You can see that the siding track is not in that good of condition. So the southbound, which is what we're looking at, the nose of the southbound unit coming at us, they would just pull into the siding, let the northbound go, and then back out onto the main, and off they went. This is the other end of the siding. This is the south end of the siding. You can see the semaphores there, camera right. But this is a southbound Floridian meeting a northbound L&N freight. And as it turns out, that C420 on the nose, on the point, is an ex-Monon unit. You can hardly see it, but it is. Oh, and for a while there, the train ran with these XSP baggage cars that were kind of interesting. A little south of there, a place called Guthrie. See a brand new, looks like hotbox detector has been built. And you can also see that it looks like the searchlight's going to replace the interesting little double semaphore there. 235 miles from Chicago now. A little bit of the countryside, limestone sort of hillsides and creeks running down in the valleys there where the farmland is. CN unit on the point here, again, I don't know what was going on with leased power or what have you here, but we did see some CN power there for a while. I was probably excited to shoot the CN power, right? And now that's all I can see. It's ironical. Nice S-curve there, approaching Peerless. So again, I should give a shout out to Gary Dozel, because this is probably a place he showed me, you know, and said, this is what a rail photograph should be, you know, where there's a nice S-curve or something of scenic beauty to go with the railroad, the context around the railroad. Place called Thornton. I just found this slide recently, or sort of stopped to scan it. I don't have that many pictures I took in those 4 or 5 years, but and I think I've caught all the good ones and scanned them. But I just scanned this one recently, and I realized I must have climbed the semaphore at the north end of Thornton siding here. I did look up. I wrote something about the train must have sawed through, but I really don't know if that's true or not. I looked up the track diagram, and the siding is 89 cars long. And now we're in Bedford, which is about 20 or 30 miles south of Bloomington, where I grew up. This is the depot on the north side, the Monon depot on the north side of town. You may have seen pictures of the street running in Bedford there. The Milwaukee crosses over the Monon here behind me. I don't know, just 100 feet or so. And there's your street running. Unfortunately, it would have been nice if I took maybe one more picture here and got the courthouse is just out of frame to the right. So this is right next to the courthouse in downtown Bedford. Really, really something to see trains going through there. This is all gone now. The Monon is completely gone. There's no railroads. The Milwaukee's gone in Bedford, and the Monon's gone as well, unfortunately. So I want to just, that's it for the two railroads that went through Bloomington. I want to just go quickly, just show you some other roads around my area, and then I'll pop over into Illinois and up to Wisconsin very briefly. But first here for my expanded field, we'll go to the south. As I mentioned, the Milwaukee Road was in Bedford. We have the Ohio and Mississippi a little further south in Mitchell, Indiana. And that's the B&O, of course. It's built as broad gauge, which is pretty interesting. And then the southern below that, I didn't get down there as often, but I got down to the Bedford and Mitchell where the B&O was fairly often. So we have some pictures of that. I don't have a lot of pictures of the Milwaukee in Bedford, but this is known as the Southeastern. And that's the signal for the crossing of the Monon. It's curling around and it's going to cross the Monon presently. And I think these were the only units I saw when I saw these trains. The Milwaukee, when the L&N gobbled up the Monon, the Milwaukee got trackage rights between Bedford and Louisville. So they got to run south on the Monon from there. And the only units I ever saw were these rebuilt Jeeps consistently. Later on, once again, the larger units would come. It may have been, someone told me it might have been after the Western expansion was abandoned. Some of those bigger units might have come east on the Milwaukee, but I'm not sure. This is a train coming around the Y there at that depot we saw before on the Monon where they were handing up orders to that northbound L&N train. It's about the same spot. I'm standing with the depot right at my back. So this is a Milwaukee train coming around the Y, and it's going to go south on the Monon here. And that's Lloyd Kimball, if anybody knows the name. Lloyd Kimball worked at the Bedford Depot for a long time. Was a real great guy, rail historian. And that's him handing up orders here. Here you can see the effect of the flash bulbs. They just weren't that good at freezing action because the duration of the burn is fairly long, so it doesn't freeze motion like a electronic flash does. And I believe what they used to do is they would just hang this. This is the mast for the Monon order board, but I think for the Milwaukee they would hang this lantern on the that protuberance there on the mast of the order board, and that meant the Milwaukee crew would pick up orders. And this is just south of Bedford. 49 miles from Chicago now. Siding there called Sand Pit. And there now we're at Mitchell, where the B&O crossed the Monon here. So I've just got 2 or 3 pictures of the B&O here. This is east of Mitchell. We've got there were a couple of tunnels within easy drive of Mitchell, one on either side. So it was always fun to go check those out. This is a eastbound train, east portal of Big Tunnel. I was shooting, I don't know what I was shooting with. It's like a super wide angle. It may have been a 20mm lens here. But going down to the B&O was a real treat because the B&O was a slick operation. And then I would go down to the Southern, and again, slick operation. newer EMD equipment, looking in really good shape. Well, in the freights, I think they were maybe working a local here with these GP30s. Fantastic wagon top caboose here. This is the yard right in Mitchell. It's a little west of Mitchell at a siding called Georgia. So once again, I think I was shooting both color and black and white this day. So just a couple of shots of the B&O. I was thinking about maybe making a project out of the B&O because it is kind of an interesting, the Ohio and Mississippi is a pretty interesting road built as broad gauge with those tunnels and all. There's still some of those signals around, which people are sort of, it's kind of like the semaphores on the Santa Fe now. A lot of people are trying to photograph those signals, those color position lights. But I don't know. I just haven't gotten around to driving down there. I'm older now, and it's hard to get in the car and drive for that distance, you know, and get the job done. So I don't know if I'm going to do that program or that project. Anyway, south of Mitchell, you go further down into southern Indiana, and you run into the southern, which also goes to St. Louis, like the Ohio and Mississippi did. It goes between Louisville and St. Louis. The B&O goes between Cincinnati and St. Louis. Somehow I've talked my way onto a train here, an eastbound train, and we're looking at a westbound come toward us. This is a little place called Milltown, and I really enjoy, when I think back on driving down when I first saw this road, it was just amazing. You know, they were running with units in the middle of the train. They had a little radio car that, you know, this is a precursor to you know, what we see now with DPUs. It was just really a heck of a railroad. And here we see, of course, an SD45 running long hood forward, which is pretty cool. And this is a tunnel they have. There's several tunnels on this line. They daylighted one since I moved away, but this is Duncan Tunnel, which is sort of the way they get down. They drop down a pretty steep hill through the tunnel to get down to New Albany near Louisville. So that was to the south. We'll just go to the north quickly in Indiana. We'll pop up to the Pennsylvania at Limedale. We'll shoot a little few images of the Big Four, the New York Central through Indianapolis. And these two lines are streaming towards St. Louis as well, right? And then just a little bit in Indianapolis itself. This is that tower we saw before. I had the order, I was shooting the southbound Floridian there with just a corner of the tower in it. I was over there by that order board. But here we see a Pensy train eastbound on the Pensy here. This line would not last long. On this side, the New York Central was the much better line. On the other side of Terre Haute towards St. Louis, the Pensy's the better line. So they would abandon the other road in those cases. This is the Big Four yard and known as Avon, west of Indianapolis. There's lots of action up there. Again, I had a couple of trains a day on the IC. Maybe a couple of trains a day on the LNN, maybe a little more on the LNN, but nothing like this. You know, we would get in the car and go up to the Big Four and this huge hump yard there at Avon. It was really something, you know, lots of trains on this line. Of course, these are some pictures made right after Conrail came into being, and it was kind of fun to go up there and photograph all kinds of paint schemes and whatnot from the East Coast, things of that nature. We can see Erie, Lackawanna, SDP 45, and central of New Jersey there as well. This is a train going west from Avon at Danville, and we can see a couple of matched set of GP35s of Reading on that train. This was a fun train to chase. So we were driving through the fields of Indiana trying to catch this. We were able to photograph it several times. This is going back the other direction on the Big Four towards Indianapolis. You can see at the very extreme left side of the frame, you can see Union Station. I'm standing on the steps of a tower, IJ Tower. The B&O and the P&E are the tracks on the left. They come and join the Big Four here, go through town, and then split on the other side. Go through Union Station and then split on the other side. The Pensie's just out of sight in the trees off to the right. They had their own bridge over the White River, which is just ahead of us. And then, of course, they made the same station and then headed east on the other side. This was at Union Station. Here's another Amtrak train that would soon be discontinued. This is the National Limited, eastbound National Limited, leaving Union Station in Indianapolis, going by IU Tower, which was just torn down, nice brick tower, which was just torn down a few years ago. If you know Don Toon, he was very active in trying to save some of the equipment in that line, that tower. This is further up the Big Four, a line here. Oh darn, I forget what line crossed here. It might have been, yeah, I'm not even going to venture a guess here, but one of the lines is crossing the Big Four here in a tower, and we see that they were giving. I remember this train was flying by, and they're giving orders to both the the head end and the caboose. You can see the operator. So now we can move over. We'll head from Indiana over to Illinois. We'll follow the IC line to Effingham. That's the Indianapolis line goes to Effingham. So we'll follow it over, and then we'll go up the IC main. Maybe pop over to the Alton, and then just a couple of images of Chicago before we get to Wisconsin. This is the IC line where it crosses the Wabash to get into Illinois. For a few months, for 9 months after high school, I worked for the Illinois Central, and I had a job as third trick clerk at Palestine. So this is my workplace here. Follow line over to Effingham, and this is where the Pensie now, as I was talking about, Conrail sort of made this the main line to St. Louis. The Pensie through here. So this line would see the National Limited here as well. Lots of trains. This is where it crosses the IC main line, north-south main line here. The main line of Mid-America. This is north of there at Galton. So one of my comrades, Ron Potch, who I mentioned before, was from Illinois, and this is his stomping ground. So he knew everything that was going on around here, and we spent a little bit of time over here, Mattoon and Effingham and Tuscola, places like that. Loved going to the tower here at Tuscola because I mean you could see, and I think I have pictures on one day when I got an IC train, a B&O, and a Mopac train here. Wasn't CNEI by then, but it's pretty nice to see the Mopac. All three of those lines. Later on, they would reconfigure this crossing to simplify it. The B&O and the UP or CNEI, Mopac, whatever you want to call it. Joined up prior to this spot, and then they had a simpler crossing, and then it would split again on the other side. I'm standing on the east side looking west here. I don't know if anybody knows Terry Shearer, but he worked he worked at this tower often when we would stop by. He was an interesting guy to talk to. Really knew a lot about the IC. Here we are at Champaign. This is the first time I saw an F-40 on the Illini. It spent the night there. It would come down to Champaign, turn around, and it spent the night there, and then go back up first thing in the morning. For a while, it was quite the thing to go over to Bloomington, Illinois, and photograph F units of the GM&O. It was kind of a haven for those. So we enjoyed going over there. We would take night shots of the F units, caught a few trains with them going up and down the Alton. You can see the third one there has been painted. I think the only, or maybe two of them are. Yeah, I think two of them are. Not many were painted in the IC scheme, but a couple were. And they were all F3s as well. Someone told me, some of these units went to Boston afterwards and were put into service running commuters. And those polling pockets were a giveaway that these Fs were GM&O Fs, which is pretty interesting. And I think I just heard that they may do some reconfiguring through Springfield, and this line here will no longer carry trains, I believe, where you can photograph the trains going north or south by the state capitol there. This is further south on the Alton. This is where the CNW crosses over. For a while, they had a train with, they were allowed to run trains with no cabooses and less crew, right? It was called the Slingshot for a while there. I think every time I saw it, it had like one trailer on it. It was usually empty, completely empty when I saw it. Maybe one or two trailers on it is all. But it's sort of a nifty little train that they were trying to make successful. I only have just a couple of pictures around Chicago. We did go up to Chicago a fair amount, but you can't just show just a few. Although I guess that's what I'm doing. I'm just sort of glancing by Chicago. Here you can see it, the rock at this is one of the rockets, of course. I don't know which one. I'm going to say Peoria rocket, but one of you might know. More than me, more than I. That's a Wabash crossing over the Rock Island there near New Lenox. This is right in town, of course, and I looked this up. I had to ask on Facebook what this thing was, and of course the Chicago rail historians knew exactly what it was, and gave me a link to it. And the amazing thing about this, though, isn't this experiment with a Fiat rail car. The amazing thing to me is how open the space is here. It's all built up now. You can photograph the rock at this spot off of Roosevelt Road, but it's just it's amazing. They're just squeezing in between two very large buildings here, and because of that, I don't think you could see the Chicago Board of Trade from this spot. I can't imagine. Joliet, of course, just passing by. I like all those semaphores. I would have liked to have photographed there more. We'll just pop up into Wisconsin a little bit. Since I knew Gary Dozel, after he was attending Indiana University, after that he got a gig at Kalmbach, so he was living in Waukesha for a while. I think that's why I found myself up in Milwaukee visiting him a few times. So I have a few shots in Milwaukee. I've got a Sioux Line train on the Milwaukee Road going north out of Milwaukee, and then I have just a little. I think I photographed along the Green Bay and Western like 2 days, and that's it. And I also caught one train on what I call the charter line. I don't know what you all call it, but the original Milwaukee Road line there west of Milwaukee. This is right in town. I think it's near National Avenue. I'm not sure. That may be the next bridge sort of behind me, or maybe a block or two behind me, the way the train is going. But this is a freight train coming north there. And again, I'm sure you all know exactly where this is. This is not my turf. This is about from the same spot looking north. That's the same train. We see the caboose of there, and it's going to split off and go to the freight area, and the turbo, of course, is going to go up to Union Station, downtown Milwaukee beyond. I imagine downtown Milwaukee is probably similar to what I was feeling about Chicago. I don't know, but I imagine that downtown Milwaukee has changed quite a bit in 40 years, 45 years. Another shot of downtown. I had to look this up. It's pretty amazing what you can do with Google Maps now and Street View, right? You can find where you were 50 years ago and look that up. Or you go on Facebook and ask someone. You ask a railroader or someone on the Milwaukee Road Historical site on Facebook, and someone's going to know. You might get your answer in 2 minutes. You know, it's pretty amazing. That's the only reason I like Facebook. Don't like it otherwise. This is really something for me to see, coming from a little sleepy town in Bloomington, southern Indiana, come to a city, see things like this. SW1, F units all over the place, Fairbanks Morse switchers here and there, lots of box cars and big busy yard, and engine tracks. Pretty amazing. Cutoff Tower here is near, I think it's near where I just took that last picture, but again, you all would know better than I. And I'm going to guess this is the North Coast Hiawatha rather than the Empire Builder, but I don't know. Someone in the chat might know that. I did get to ride the North Coast Hiawatha back from Bozeman, Montana, rode it all the way to Milwaukee one time. So that was kind of nice that I rode one of the trains, actually two, the Floridian as well, that are gone. This is the Sioux Line train I was talking about on the Milwaukee Road. They had trackage rides apparently from Rugby Junction down to Milwaukee, and this is the northbound train leaving left Milwaukee. I got it at near Havenswood, I think it's called, going under a bridge there with the CNW, and then a few places up to Rugby Junction. I noticed looking at Street View, I was really having a hard time locking down these locations. It was very difficult. And I realized that, I surmised that this this bridge had been removed. And I'm pretty certain that that's the case. I can't even see, I'm glad you can see my title. I can't because of these little screens. Does it say Germantown there, east of Germantown? And this is the train getting up to Rugby Junction, where it's getting on the Sioux main line. Here it is on its home rails. Okay, so just a couple more things. I have no idea what time it is. I can't see my clock either, so I'm flying blind here. Hopefully I'm not going too slow or too fast. And I haven't checked chat. What's going on in chat? I don't see any questions, so that's okay. We can do questions afterwards. But anyway, got to photograph on the Green Band Western for a couple of days only. And I'm glad I did. You all must enjoy I was telling Mike the other day that you all probably think of the Green Band Western as I do the Monon. It seems like a real Wisconsin railroad. And it's great too that they ran alcoves, of course. Lots of alcoves. Here's a shot right in Green Bay. There was a full moon that night, but this is a bit of trickery going on here. I did a double exposure, took the photograph of the alcove and the grain elevator there with the Green Bay route painted on the side, and took that photograph first, and then I put on a longer lens. And there's a way you can wind your film you can wind your shutter, but you have to push the button on the bottom of the camera so the film doesn't move, right? And so there's a way you can sort of do that with these old mechanical cameras. And then I put on a longer lens and photographed the moon, did a little double exposure that way in camera. The reason it's black and white is I did shoot this in color, but there was a that green light I was talking about shining on the side of the unit, and it just kind of wrecked it. So I decided to make this one black and white. I'm happy with how the moon came out, though. This is on the Anapian Western, which is Green Bay and Western's line to Algoma. Pretty interesting. I didn't even know that this existed until I scanned a few slides, and I made a website of these images and sent them to some people in the Green Bay and Western Historical Society, right? And I said, where are these pictures taken? You know, and they were very helpful and giving me all kinds of information. Oh, my dad worked at the cheese plant there, you know, in Casco. So they were able to give me lots of information about where these pictures were taken. So if you're off in the country, you know, there's not street view everywhere. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's difficult to track these things down. And if you can talk to railroaders who were on the line back then, of course, they can look at a picture with very little information in it and know exactly where it was taken. So again, I like Facebook for that reason. It can connect you up to people like that. And this is the line, the original line of the Milwaukee Road. I thought maybe you would find this interesting. Only photographed one train on this line one day, probably when I was visiting Gary there in Milwaukee or Waukesha. But this is near Palmyra. You can see all the grass between the tracks here. Nice rib-sided caboose. This is easy to find on Street View. That building still exists, so that was nice. And I think this depot still exists as well. North Prairie. And this is, I think, the last shot I took that day of the train rolling towards Waukesha here. And the CNW line is in the distance there, running parallel. It's a bike path now, apparently. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about this. I'm almost done here. The Staggers Act was passed right about the time I went off to New York and stopped shooting trains. I missed out on the dramatic changes, not all due to Staggers, that took place in the last 2 decades of the 20th century and into the next. When I got back into it, there was an adjustment. For this Rip Van Winkle, I didn't really notice as we went from 33 Class 1 railroads down to 7. And what happened to EMD's dominance in the field of locomotives? When I left for New York, LaGrange was right in the middle of their record run of one model, the SD 40-2. And where are the cabooses? Currently, PSR is having a dramatic effect on railroad workforce, not unlike Staggers. And that's not my idea. You know, there are plenty of people who are writing about that. I'm sorry, let me start again. Currently, PSR is having a dramatic effect on the railroad workforce, not unlike Staggers wrought 40 years ago. It's been a topic of conversation for a few years. but East Palestine, Ohio will keep it in top of mind for some time to come, I imagine. Just a little coda here. Things I've worked on since the Golden Spike is just a few years. I sort of hung that up in 2019 when the Golden Spike happened in May of that year. For a while, I photographed semaphores on the Santa Fe for a couple of years there. I just made a few trips out. It wasn't that extensive. And I'll show you a few published images that have been around recently. Maybe you saw them. And last year, about this time, I was photographing the last street running in Michigan City. Here's an article I had in the Railroad History on the semaphores. It's a nice place called Colmore. It's fabulous. Jointed rail, semaphores. I think they've probably come down. I haven't kept up, but it seems like the last semaphores are coming down right about now. That's Levy, a little south of Colmore. That's Wagon Mound in the background. It was interesting though, because I grew up with semaphores on the Monon, so it was kind of nice to sort of dig into this idea and try to photograph some of these signals before they went away. 100-year-old signals still working on a railroad here. It's pretty cool. Couple of published images. This was Railroad History had an article on Amtrak turning 50, and it was based on the equipment. And this is back on the Monon. So this is northbound Floridian crossing the White River just south of Bedford, as we're near Sandpit, as I showed you before. And then I got a couple of these images published. I think this image was in Trains a while back, not fairly recently, because of the end of street running in Michigan City. So they've double tracked this area. I think there's one lane. There's going to be one lane of traffic where that car is, and there'll be a double track starting about where I'm standing and going west on 11th Street will be double tracked. New station built. They tore down the old one. So a lot going on there in Michigan City. But because I published a little article in the quarterly newsletter of the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society, I was able to include this. I had good reason to, I only made it up to the Chicago South Bend, South Shore and South Bend a couple of times, but I did do that in the 70s. So this was on, as you can see there, December 22nd, 1976. Nice combine. This is on 10th Street. And just to touch base, the very last thing here, something I'm interested in now is finding really interesting little spots. There's a spot in Indiana where there was a triple crossing. The Illinois Central went over the Monon branch that is no longer there, and I think a precursor to the Big Four here in Elliston near Bloomfield. I remember hearing about this, but I never photographed it back in the day. So recently I was down in Bloomington and I popped over and I was able to photograph a train there on the IC, on the former IC, Indiana Railroad now, of course. And but it's wonderful because the depot is still there for the Big Four. I'm probably standing right on the right of way of the Monon. The Monon would have come right toward me, would have crossed the Big Four there underneath the Illinois Central. So it's a pretty nifty little spot. So in these two instances, if I can do a story on something where I also have old pictures like the street running in Michigan City, I love that. Or I'm going to look for places like this that sort of tickle my fancy, But I'm kind of looking for a next project right now. I'm kind of between things. I don't know what I'm going to do next. So that's it. I want to thank you all for having me. I have to give a shout out to my institution and also Genevieve Gilmore, who funds my endowed chair. And I want to thank Mike and you all, the Wisconsin chapter, for having me. And I'll leave this picture up, and maybe I can answer a couple of questions. Again, I don't know what time it is, so I'll hand it back to Mike. Do you guys usually do
Yes.
questions or?
Yeah, by all means, Richard, thank you for that wonderful presentation, and a round of applause for everybody for Richard. And yeah, any questions, please unmute yourself and ask away.
Or are there any questions in the room?
Nothing in the room there, Keith?
No, nothing in the room, and not really hearing anything on Zoom. So
I guess not. So Richard, again, our thank you for coming here and presenting to us tonight. And maybe look forward to having you back again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Excellent.
yeah, and I just have a few more things. I forgot a couple. Again, thank you, Richard. That was great. We ended up with 12 people down here in the room. And the one thing I want to ask or check on is we are looking for a presenter for April. Would be April 14th. So if you're interested, let Mike know, or Dave Nelson. And also, if anyone is interested in being our snack person, Janet has relinquished that position when Mike became a board member and not president. So if you want to have snacks and things down here and you want to do that, let me know. And again, so check out everything, the minutes and all that from the last meetings are on our website, www.nrhswis.org. Sparks and Cinders is up from March also there. And again, if you wish to be president of the organization, we need a leader, so please consider that and let me know. So that's all I have.
Keith, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. And again, thank you. Richard said this so eloquently. Thank you to the members who tuned in here tonight. Our members make programs like this possible. So thank you for your membership. If you're not a member, please just go to www.nrhswis.org. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Richard for a last word.
You caught me unawares. I just want to say thanks. And again, I think looking at your website, the chapter is really doing good stuff. So keep up the good work.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Richard. Good night.
Wait a minute. Somebody, I think I hear somebody ask.
Yeah, Mike, this was a great show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the check is in the mail.
Thank you for renewing, Fred. Appreciate that.
Hey, Richard, Mark Lynn here. That was really, really good show. I was going to school in Champaign at the same time that you were taking most of this material. And so I saw some of that, and I knew Terry Shearer pretty well. So that was a fun time, those years in Champaign.
Yeah, I bet. Trains were still going 90 miles an hour then.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for
Well, thank you, Richard.
Thanks for the kind
Very
words.
much. Yes.
Absolutely
job.
amazing program.
Thanks a lot.